Hi, Floppers. Before we start this episode, I just wanted to remind you we are in the middle of Flop TV Season 2. That's right, the 1-hour internet televised Flophouse TV show is here for you the first Saturday of every month through February. Just go to theflophouse.simpletix.com and get your tickets or season pass for this all-new Flophouse TV stuff. We're covering movies we've never covered before. We've got video segments. It's amazing. Just go to theflophouse.simpletix.com for Flop TV Season 2. This time, it's personal.
On this episode, we discuss here.
Where?
Here.
Where?
Here.
Okay.
I wonder what it was about that third one that Stuart understood finally.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Flophouse. I'm Dan McCoy.
Hey, Dan McCoy, it's me, Stuart Wellington, your pal.
Hey, me, Stuart Wellington, your pal. It's me, your guys' other friend and the third co-host of this show, Elliot Kalin.
Well, we've all established who we are and what our deal is with
Relationship
regard
dynamic.
Well,
to
we
one
know
another.
that we know what Stuart's deal is. He's Dan's friend, and we know that what my deal is. I'm both your friends, but Dan, we don't know what your deal is.
Oh, I'm both of your friends.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, okay.
I am
But that's-
both of your friends.
but
I'm
that's-
two people
no.
in one.
No, that's my thing, being two people's
Okay.
friend. So you got to find a new
I
thing.
see. Okay.
You gotta work on a new one. Maybe you're like a drifter on the run.
Okay.
Yeah, or like a salty old sea captain who's also got a heroin addiction.
Oh, interesting. I guess he would have ready access to heroin since he's riding the high seat. So what do we do on this podcast?
Well, apparently we add flavor to my life, but also it's a podcast where we watch a bad movie and then we talk about it. A movie that either critics or audience rejected, or both audiences, rather, and or I could say audience, critics or audience. I could be very snooty about it.
This sounds like the
Rejected.
best way to use the time when we're already late with our recording. Yeah.
We had some technical difficulties before this show started, and so
This show?
I'm
Technical
pulling-
difficulties?
I'm pulling an Elliot, and the less time there is, the more I want to stretch out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about bad movies, and this
Oh.
one is by Robert Zemeckis,
Mhm.
a man,
You might know him. That's Bobby Z.
the
Like,
famous Bobby
he's
Z.
The
been
famous
around.
Bobby Z, yep.
He's been cranking out hits, banger after banger. Beowulf, Polar Express,
Okay.
Welcome
Crash.
to Marwin.
No, what was the, not Crash, Flight. Sorry.
Like you are for humorous effect, of course, focusing on his more recent efforts.
Mm-hmm.
This is a director that I genuinely loved during the first half of his career, and then
Sure.
it's
Like
been
what?
a series
Whoa,
of disappointments.
And then,
Well, we had,
unfortunately, he became more machine than man at a certain point.
Romancing the Stone,
Awesome.
Back to the Future, Who Framed
Great.
Roger Rabbit.
Awesome. Yeah,
Wonderful.
I mean, like, I'm a
Forrest
big
Gump, you
defender
love.
of. I think Death Becomes Her is very funny. And
There was a
fun.
story in one of the New York papers about how there's a big push to get Forrest Gump declared as the #1 best movie, American movie of all time.
By who?
Thoughts?
Who's
by
pushing
the
this?
movie board,
I
Who's
don't
pushing-
fucking know. Whoever's reading the
like
newspaper,
Gorst
maybe
Fump.
it's probably some dumbass fucking Instagram account.
And I'm not even one of those people who outright hates Forrest Gump. But it's a
Why
solidly.
would you hate him, dude? He's just like a nice guy.
Yeah, that's true. He doesn't mean any harm. It's really a real solid middle movie. Solid middle movie. But
yeah.
so Robert Zemeckis, yeah, he's had a few really, like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. We just watched it again not too long ago at my house. That's an amazing movie. That's an
Yes,
amazing
it's
movie.
incredible.
But he's also, lately he's gotten really into technology and making movies that are more around what can I do with this tech than necessarily about
Well,
strong storytelling. Let's say.
I feel like in some ways we're getting ahead of ourselves, but on another way,
You mean we're telling this out of order, much like the movie here?
You've given me the opening to say that one of the things I think is a big problem with this movie, which is we'll say up front, the conceit of the movie is it's all sort of it's a stationary camera from the same angle, over decades and centuries. The people who live in this area here,
And let
who
me
lived here.
And Dan, even before you get further, I just want to say when I saw the trailer for this movie, I was genuinely really intrigued by this movie. This movie is based on a comic book story by Richard Maguire that I love. I've loved it for years. I think I saw it it was in a collection anthology of either things from the magazine Raw or just like best of comics. I don't remember. And it was originally like an 8-page story.
Raw was the inspiration for the French film, right?
Yeah, for both the French film and also for the WWE show. Yeah. And so it was, Art Spiegelman and Francois Mouly, they were like, "How we gotta impact the wrestling world some way." And they, it's a great short comic that he then many years later expanded into a full length book. And I love that book. I love that comic. With the conceit being, you are always looking at the same geographical physical space, but there are different panels within panels that show you what was happening in that space at different periods in time. And it starts out saying like, here's what it was like in 1957, here's what it was like in 1982, here's what it was like in 1973, with panels kind of
Is there like a
having
little
those
Scott
times
McCloud
overlapping.
narrator telling you all this
No,
shit?
there is not. The panels are labeled with the year, but that's the extent of the narration. And otherwise, it's not even really telling full stories, although you can kind of glimpse stories between the panels. It's just this space, eventually there's a dinosaur walking through, Ben Franklin's house is nearby or whatever, but like there's not really narrative. It's more an exploration of space. And I love the book of it. So when I saw they're making a movie, I was like, this is going to be a hard movie to make, but I'm intrigued by what they're going to do. But I came into it loving this book.
So before, let's return to
and
after
now
that
back
digression.
to it. Yeah. That digression setting up what the movie was based on?
No. It just looked like Stuart maybe was going to then delay the payoff even further. And I could see why that would make a great. Stuart's making a face. He's making a puss at me.
No, Dan, it makes a great comic. But I think what you're going to say is.
Make a great comic because like it plays to the, existing like, I mean, I guess there's, obviously there's a frame to a screen as well, but like it plays to the existing nature of comics, which is a frame that is stationary. You can see these glimpses. Whereas, what I like about a movie camera is it moves around. It's right there in the name. But what I wanted to say was like off of the, it stands for Can Automate.
Go on.
My extra.
Interesting that M didn't stand for move.
Recording.
Yeah.
Apparatus.
Thank you.
Wow, yeah.
I forgot what it stood for at the end there, and of course you jumped in. But no, but you say that about the technical stuff. Like the thing is, like Zemeckis seems to be approaching this as a technical challenge, and this strikes me as exactly the wrong thing to do with this story. Like it should be a dramatic challenge. Like how do we make this compelling without a moving camera? Like what do we do? Like, and he is doing the most glossy, goofy ass way of doing this. I feel like
he has essentially made a movie that feels like a cross between a play. The characters in it talk like they're in a play. Well, here's the room. Harry just came back from the war, took a bullet. Yeah, my husband lost in the Pacific. A lot of women losing their men these days. They sure are. Everyone has to talk louder, and it echoes because they're in this one room far from the camera, and it feels like a play. It's a cross between that and a movie you would see at a museum that's kind of trying to get across, here's how people lived back in olden times.
But the thing is, like, if it was more like a play, I think I would like it better, though. Like, if it really played to the artificiality of the conceit, I think that would be better than having, like, I don't know, it's like, now we're going to see the whole history. We're going to put some lifelike CGI indigenous peoples like running around. Well, and now we're gonna, have all these like fancy like CGI backgrounds. Like, just get a green screen for God's sake for this thing.
That's not what he does.
And have a room,
We should also mention that the de-aging technology in this is AI-based de-aging technology, so that could be done in real time. Don't love that. Not a big AI guy myself.
Am I allowed to talk, or is this a Dan podcast?
I'm also taking up a lot of the oxygen.
I got interrupted when I was trying to say anything. I just didn't want it to be a double interruption.
Dan, and before Stuart talks, I'm going to interrupt again to say that Dan also it's this big, glossy, boring story, but it also is Robert Zemeckis falling back on the thing that I think he loves to do, which is here's another baby boomer life story. Great. Oh, they saw the Beatles on TV? Oh, someone fought in Vietnam? I've seen this story, Robert Zemeckis. It was called Forrest Gump. Stuart, your turn.
Although
Dan,
it is
you don't
so
talk
much more
now.
of a
Stuart's
bummer than okay.
Oh, it is a huge bummer too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we are talking about how obviously a story like this that's experimental, or it tries to explain itself, or it tries to be told in an experimental way, obviously would work better in comics. For some reason, this like fixed perspective made me think of Alan Moore's Providence, which would use that fixed perspective to horror effect. Whereas in many ways, this movie does make me feel elements of horror. Like I do feel trapped in the movie, especially
but
Especially
less
because you
trapped-
watched it twice.
But it's less that you're trapped with a sexually ravenous elder being or deep one.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, more like I am Rudolph Van Richten trapped in the bleak house in Ravenloft.
Sure.
Okay, so are we? Yeah, I mean, I feel like my general
Yeah.
notes, we've touched on a bunch of the things that we've already touched on. A lot of them. I didn't realize the de-aging technology was AI driven. Well, I guess that's another example of AI looking like dog shit and being the antithesis of art.
Well, let me clarify something about that, because I do think it's interesting how like the first time I saw AI Tom Hanks, I didn't know it was AI, but like the first time I saw de-aged.
And it's not AI fully CGI characters. It's just they apparently, from what I read, they used a program that could in real time de-age their image. So they're acting
Right.
on the sound stage, and the image coming into the cameras is an AI smoothed out young image version.
Look, I mean, apologies. I don't know the way that this works, like whether this is like putting a lot of people out of work, or in some cases, it's a case where like the artists who do these things are glad to have a new technology.
It
Like,
could be. It's possible.
This sort of like technological innovation offends me less than like being like, hey, you know what you want to do is like read stuff that is just like culled from other stuff that we've reconfigured together. And it's like, well, no, that we want new human stories that speak to human desires, unlike here. But to get back to the DH Tom Hanks, though, the first time I saw him, I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good effect. And then the problem was throughout the rest of the movie, unless he was literally then like old man Tom Hanks, I was unclear about how old Tom Hanks was supposed to be at any time, because it was not good at like distinguishing, between like even like 17 and 30.
Yeah, he from the age of 17 to the age of about 50, he looks kind of the same. I'll say this for it. One, it looks better than young man Robert De Niro in The Irishman. A better movie where he does seem like an old man with dark hair.
Stuart is shaking his head. He loves it.
No, I love that shit. When he's fucking curb stomping that guy in the oldest way possible.
You can tell he doesn't have a full range of motion in his hips while he's curb stomping. But also,
His backs are like going to kill him the next day.
I think this AI, this AI, honey, what do you can't even get off the couch? Nah, I was curb stomping a guy yesterday. I'm paying for it now.
Oh, you know what the doctor said about curb stomping? You can't do that
I got to do my work. I got to do my work.
Curb stomping's part of painting houses, guys. It's essential.
True. The other thing is that I feel like the AI work was really served well by the way I watched this movie, which was on an iPad while I was doing the dishes. So my eyes weren't always on the screen, and I would be like, "Oh, this looks pretty good." And there'd be times when Tom Hanks or another character would get really close to the camera. Mainly Tom Hanks' character when he gets close to the camera, and it would suddenly be like, "Oh, that's not a fully real face that I'm looking at there."
Couple other notes. There is, in addition to that, there is a pretty good CGI baby getting knocked off a couch sequence. I thought that was a good laugh. That was pretty funny.
That was a funny laugh and farther than I thought they were going to go. That baby just falling face first on the couch.
Okay, and as you said, this is fixed perspective. The majority of the story is going to take place in a house, a single house.
Yeah,
and
like
within
House
within the confines of this house, we see, just like to give you an overview, we see a wedding, a funeral, a birth, a death, and basically one of every major
The invention
American
of the lazy
holiday.
boy chair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes.
that's true.
I just want to say, there's various stories that we glimpse throughout.
Oh, yeah,
this,
we're going to touch on all of them.
and some of them we come back to more than others.
Exhaustively.
But I think the clear winner is the lazy boy couple, who
Yes.
are the only people who have any verve and likability in this film.
The only ones with a happy ending, but also the ones that are so totally disconnected from almost every other story. They were the only ones they would show up just dancing to 20s music or 30s music, and I'd be like, "What? I'm not quite sure why I'm watching this."
I don't know, but they seem cool.
Yeah.
they do.
The lead from the Minx gets to be on the other side of the camera. I like the inventor guy. I think his outfits go fucking hard as hell, and he dances well. Love that shit. Okay,
They're a very
So,
sexual couple in a way that the other couples are not that we see in this. Yeah.
Yep, as we said, it's a fixed perspective, focusing on an area that is, I guess, Philadelphia.
I mean, Ben Franklin's house was
William
there.
Well, it's
Franklin.
technically Ben Franklin's son's house. He
Okay.
which I think
Illegitimate
was in,
son. Yep.
which I think he lived in New York State. So I think it might be somewhere in New York, but I could
There's
be wrong
also
about that.
I saw a note that said potentially Perth Amboy.
Yeah, could be. It
New
could be.
Jersey,
Yeah,
okay.
it could be in New Jersey. Actually,
Okay,
Perth Amboy makes sense. Yeah.
So there's also the movie opens with a little bit of a montage, and then it goes all the way back to the dawn of time. We have dawn of time. We have dinosaurs, and then we get to see the meteor striking the Earth that kills the dinosaurs. Didn't realize that happened in New Jersey.
Yeah, that's the
but
thing.
That
was the
explains
moment.
a lot about New Jersey, if you ask me.
That was one of those moments where I was like, I know it's like, again, the comic book does things a little differently. It kind of increases the amount of time as it goes on, so to kind of surprise you with how far the conceit's going to go. This does the opposite, where it kind of shows you some rooms, and then it goes back to the dawn of time, which is, I feel like, takes a little bit of the thrill out of it. But also, like, it's one of those things where it's like, part of the fun of it is also seeing like a dinosaur moment that is not a historic moment, that this maybe because a story made out of the everyday moments. So to have that meteor strike is a bit of an overkill. I know it looks cool, but also like I was like, Bobby Z, that took place in Mexico. Like, unless this story takes place in Mexico, you cannot rewrite where the asteroid hit that killed the dinosaurs. Like, come on, guys, what are you doing?
Maybe it was like a friend of the original asteroid. Okay, so
It's also, I mean, it is
video
possible the
game?
asteroid maybe broke up in the atmosphere. The main chunk hit in the Yucatan, and then some smaller particle decided to go to Perth Amboy to see if they had opened the movie theater there that I used to go to when I was a kid.
yeah. It's
Probably
trying
didn't
to make its way to Rutt's Hut. Unfortunately, didn't make it all the way there.
No.
Rutt's Hut, known for their hot dogs.
Yes,
Dan.
millions of years too early. Yeah.
So
That's
this
good.
meteor, of course, ushers in an ice age. Everything is going super duper fast. It's super sped up.
I thought
and
you were like,
fast.
Yeah.
everything's going super well.
Everything's going super well
Just
in the
according to
world
plan.
and on this podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, we see like a forest primeval, and then we see some indigenous people hunting, and then and of course around now we see a hummingbird that will show up at the very end of the movie. This eternal hummingbird character,
Yeah.
the prisoner of London or whatever that guy's. What's that? What's that guy known who's trapped
I think
in
it's the
London
prisoner of
forever?
London, right? Yeah.
Yep.
He can travel through time, but he can't leave London. Yeah.
Yeah, if I'm right, everybody write in and tell Dan that Stuart's right again.
Oh, wait,
Chalk
but-
another one. Put
And I'll
another
be
on the
like,
scoreboard.
I
Roll
don't
two
remember what
balls.
this is in reference to.
Okay, so then we go to colonial times. We see a big manor house being built, and then we see the building of the house that we will then spend the rest of our time at, the place we are trapped at for the next hour and a half.
The here. Yeah.
Okay.
Like Jigsaw.
So there, basically, so there's a
Either
bunch
you
of
have to cut off your own leg, or you got to watch this Robert Zemeckis movie. Oh, Jigsaw. Oof.
I don't want to play a little game. So there is one main story. There's a story of one family that seems to take the majority of the movie, but
Yeah.
there's a number of side stories that intersect. And while the movie isn't told linearly, each side story seems to follow all the stories seem to follow a linear path, even though they're
For the
They're
most
more
part,
or
they're
less for the most
jumping,
part.
jumping
More or
back
less,
and forth, I think.
But it's not
But-
so
and
radical that
they're-
it's clearly told in a way where it's jumping a little bit, but it is mostly a forward momentum through time for each
Yes,
one. Yeah.
and trying to show connections
Yeah.
between the different experiences in this space. So just to touch on these side stories, there's a young indigenous couple. At one point, they exchange jewelry. They get married. They have a baby. She dies. We have a funeral, and then he mourns her again. Very funny aging situation. He looks very funny. This elderly native guy who just looks like a normal guy with a wrinkly face,
elderly
like
makeup,
he's like he's one of the kids from Akira. We have-
Right before the shot, they gave him like a real strong prune or like a real strong lemon, and he just puckered up. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant they had him soaking a bathtub for a long time.
That's what they did.
Now
yeah.
we're going. Of course, we're going through these side stories chronologically. Although, again, in the movie, they're all sprinkled throughout. We have William Franklin, the illegitimate son of Ben Franklin, who's complaining about his father and his politics. He is a British sympathizer. There's a sequence where a kid throws an apple basically at the camera, and it explodes all over him. It's pretty funny. That I mean, that storyline just basically shows little bits of the Revolutionary War. We have
There's a part at the end. I have to mention this though, where a soldier rides up, and there's a bunch of Continental soldiers there, and a soldier rides up and he goes, "News from a dispatch from General Washington. The British have surrendered. The war is over." And the other soldiers could not give less of a shit, and what they do have no reaction to it. And one of them just goes, "What now?" It's like, and then it cuts to America 200 years later or something. But I thought it was so funny. I was like, I got to imagine that the soldiers had more of a reaction to learning the war was over and they had won than just the sense of like, okay, another damn thing
I'm
after
out
another.
of a job now, I guess.
yeah. Well, let me just change a battle in my schedule for next week to no battle.
I get so depressed when I don't have anything to do.
I just like having something to look forward to, even if it's a battle.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Just
the next...
I have limited experience with winning wars, but I seem to remember that when we won World War II, it seemed like people were excited.
There was confetti. There was a kiss.
Yeah. At least one. Yeah.
Yeah, at least one. We have one of the side stories is a budding pilot, an enthusiastic airplane pilot, and his nagging wife, whose trait is that she has a child and doesn't want him to be flying. He, of course, does not die from flying his plane to Schenectady. No, he dies of influenza.
Yeah,
this is handled. This was so funny to me, the way this was handled. He is lying in his casket with a pilot's cap on, with goggles on it. All the flowers are in the shapes of planes and propellers. And there's two people with their backs to the camera, and he's like, "Oh, she was really mad about it, da-da-da-da." And she says, what's weird is that you see his wife, his widow, before the funeral saying, "How could you let this happen?" or something like that, which implies, again, that it's a flying accident. She's been attacking his flying hobby the whole time. And you see the two, and then he goes, "Oh, I'm surprised they had an open funeral. Usually there's open casket. Usually there's not much of the body after a plane crash. It wasn't a plane crash that killed him." And then he turns. You see they're both wearing masks. It was influenza. And it's like, so you're just learning this at the funeral? Do you not know them well? But also the sudden reveal of the masks I thought was so funny. The whole thing was so funny.
This plot, not to make a bad plane pun, but it sputters out because it's just like, okay, it's like all just build to this punchline that is obviously meant to be like, it's like COVID,
because there's some COVID stuff in this movie too.
It's not saying anything. It's not saying anything about anything.
No, I mean, not to. Maybe I'm just talking tough because I'm with my boys, but
the whole movie isn't saying anything.
But what I would say is, if my wife was so against me flying a plane around that she would be constantly complaining about it, if that's my favorite thing to do in the world, I'd get a new wife, dog. Go fly up and find a Martian wife or something.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so we
What if your wife's Michelle Dockery though?
Let me change my story.
Hold on, run the numbers on that one. Yeah.
Okay, so the next one, of course, is, as we said, the Bohemian couple, where she is kind of a flapper and he's an inventor, and he invents the Lazy Boy. Of course, check the history books. This guy did not invent the Lazy Boy.
I don't think so. And also the
recliners that existed for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and her entire job seems to be to hang around the house in her underwear and a robe and dance to the radio. And his job is to invent things in an undershirt and slacks as suit pants.
Love it.
And I was like, there is nothing about these people's lives that does not involve dancing to the radio, taking dirty pictures of each other, or inventing the Lazy Boy. It is, and they have no connection with any other storyline otherwise. It's just so funny to me that they're like, all right,
it's a breath of fresh air, and otherwise stale.
We got to get across the breadth of the American experience over millions of years. Well, we got to get the invention of the Lazy Boy in there.
They're sort of like a slob Nick and Nora Charles, without even the detecting.
I could see, without the detecting, one of the two main things about Nick and Nora.
Yeah. Okay, and then we flash forward. There's a couple with a teenage son, and they have a housekeeper, and they deal with COVID, and their housekeeper, of course, dies of COVID, and then they move out. Those are the side stories. Did I miss any?
This is the couple that is clearly like, well, oh God, we don't have any black people in this movie. We should have one family be black and give them nothing.
Yeah,
they have
it doesn't help when the
one
plot line
scene
is nothing.
There's the one scene where they are explaining to their teenage son, here's how you handle being stopped at a traffic stop by a police officer.
Yes.
And it feels like a very ham-handed exactly way of being like, oh yeah, the black experience. Oh boy, you better believe that's part of the American story. Gotta put some of that in there. And I will say, in a better movie, I would have been like, this is an interesting scene because this is something none of the other families have to deal with. And I wish that I would just wish it was a
Right.
stronger movie so that moment would have hit a little harder.
Yeah.
you
Well, the
know?
problem is like it's clear that whole family is in there just for that moment. They don't
Yes.
give them
Yeah.
anything else of significance.
They have otherwise
So-
no personality
And
whatsoever.
to bury their housekeeper, Raquel.
And for the housekeeper
true.
to
Raquel
have a
did
moment where she
pass
can no
away.
longer smell, and then the next time we see her, she's dead.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then they both turn to the camera wearing masks. It's great. Okay. But the bulk of
But
the
not
story.
masks like in the Twilight Zone episode Masks, where they're like the masks deform their faces or anything.
Mhm. Or like masks from the cartoon show Mask, where they have like
Yeah.
robot masks. Okay.
And
so,
their vehicles change into other vehicles. Yeah.
exactly. So the bulk of the movie focuses on the story of the Young family. We are introduced
Who are
to
very old by the end of it.
Mhm, that's true. It seems almost ironic. The first couple we meet is Al and Rose. Al is recently back from World War II, played by Paul Bettany. He begins by yelling a lot, which doesn't help the feel of watching a bad play, a bad stage
Yeah.
production.
Yeah. Although it is heightened, a lot of the stuff he's doing, especially when he's like in rooms by himself, essentially like monologuing. But for me, and this is a credit to how much I like Paul Bettany, I think, like as much as I liked anything in the movie, I'm like, well, like this feels like a guy, and I have feelings about what's happening when I don't have feelings about other characters,
Certainly, he's the one. I feel like it's partly the story they give him, which
Yeah.
has a lot more depth to it than some of the other ones. In that, as he's a veteran, he spends decades of his life, dealing with the frustration and trauma of that, and he doesn't kind of get over it until after his wife dies, essentially.
Yeah.
And he has an alcohol problem, and he deals with he has so much more going on
Oh,
in
you
his
think he
story.
has an
does.
alcohol problem?
He does.
I mean, there's
pull-
literally a scene where he realizes that he has to stop and he takes all the bottles out.
He does
But
pull himself together before his wife dies, but it's because she's like had
she has a
stroke.
She has a stroke.
you know?
There is a lot of talking really loud for a person who's
Yeah.
in a movie rather than in a play. But I agree. I did feel by the end of it that I thought Paul Bettany had come out kind of on the
he's
stronger
not too
end.
bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so they buy the house despite it being a little more expensive than they expected because Rose is pregnant. Al takes a sales job, but he is continually dissatisfied. He's passed over for promotion. He ends up getting laid off and has to find a different sales job. And he develops a pretty severe drinking problem.
He is almost never not drinking in this movie.
Uh-huh.
He's always every single scene with him for a long section of it, he has a drink in his hand.
Kind of like Dan McCoy.
He is also a stand-in for I'm going to jump ahead to sort of a more general critique of the movie. Like part of the problem with this movie is the characters are meant to be such sort of like broad
Symbols.
stand-ins for like swaths of American life, and they don't generate any like personality of their own. And he is very much like the stand-in of this greatest generation, like the dad of our boomer hero who had war trauma, had a drinking problem,
He's
was not
emotionally
able to
closed
be
off,
nice
yeah.
to his family. Yeah, and
He's always yelling, "God damn it!" at his kids.
Yeah. Especially when his CGI kid gets knocked off a couch.
Yeah, but I think that's a major issue with the movie. Dan, you're right. Is that these characters are supposed to be so universal in a certain type that they fail to really register as individual people.
Yeah.
And it'd be more interesting as individual in the way that Lazy Boy couple. I'm not quite sure what type they're supposed to be, except free living 20s, 30s. I mean, it's 1940 by the time they leave that house. But there is something so they don't have much character either, but it's so specific. They're always in their underwear. He's inventing the Lazy Boy chair. As ridiculous as I find it, it's so specific that it's better.
They feel like characters from an episode of Ghosts, either the British or,
Yeah,
or
they
American
do.
version.
Totally.
I could see that.
Okay. So they end up having 3 children together. Their eldest is Richard, who has an artistic bent that will eventually be played by Tom Hanks. There is a
The
very funny
artistic bent
scene.
will eventually be played by Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
It's like
Stewart's face fell.
What was that movie we watched where people were? It was Helen Mirren and stuff were representing symbolic aspects
Oh,
of
yeah.
life.
called Herman's Head.
That's what it was. That's right. That's right.
So
That's right, because I remembered it mostly by its Spanish name, La Cabeza del Hormone.
So there's a really funny moment where teenage Tom Hanks, or Richard in this case,
Yeah.
is played by a actor, but is voiced by Tom Hanks, and it is very disorienting.
I think
That's
it
the
is
scene
very.
where Paul Bettany explains that he's been places, he's traveled all over Pennsylvania and eaten in places you couldn't even imagine. One night, he took somebody home to his room.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how the
And
response
Tom Hanks is like, why are you telling me this? I'm like, yes, why are you telling us this?
This this is the
and
kind
then
of thing
there's
dads tell their kids when they reach a certain age. Just happens.
There's also a great line there where Tom Hanks is sitting there drawing pictures of the room that we will spend an hour and a half looking at. And he's like, who would want to look at pictures of this room? I'm like, no shit, dude.
The movie has become self-aware.
Say the quiet part loud.
Something that I think is very funny is that we seem to have a generation of filmmakers who cannot imagine that the audience will be able to buy two different performers playing the same character at different ages. And this is the same generation, pretty much, that made The Godfather Part 2, in which Robert De Niro and Robert De Niro plays the character Marlon Brando played in the previous movie. And it's not like everyone was like, wait, that's not what Marlon Brando looked like when he was young. Like, hold on a sec. Like, the idea that you would have to dub Tom Hanks's voice in for a teenage character is so silly to me. Or that you would de-age, or the de-aging Indiana Jones's face in Crystal Dial of Time or whatever it is. I couldn't remember the name of it for a second. It just is, I find it very funny that they're like, audiences are idiots. They can't imagine two people would be the same person,
Well, that's what, I mean, that ties in. Like, I think that if you'd done this more like a play and concentrated more on like, okay, how via the blocking of characters within the scene are we going to like make this interesting rather than like futz it up with a bunch of digital garbage. But anyway.
But Stuart, you were just about to get to the exciting part of the story.
Yeah.
Richard starts dating Margaret. So Tom Hanks plays Richard. Margaret is played by Robin Wright. Oof.
Who are you thinking of?
Rebecca Wright, obviously.
Rebecca Hall. I wish.
And of course, this is their long-awaited reunion of Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, and Robert Zemeckis, who brought us the aforementioned Forrest Gump, a
so
Best
we're back
Picture-winning
in Gumptown.
classic, back in Gumptown, USA. Yep. Not to be confused with Forrest Gump 2, Gump Again, the fake movie that they are making in the movie Cecil B. Demented with Kevin Nealon as Forrest Gump, which I thought Kevin Nealon playing himself as Forrest Gump, and the Forrest Gump stuff in that movie is so funny.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in years. I'm sure it's tasteless. It's John Waters movie still. Come on.
Yeah. Okay. So despite being young, they get pregnant. And they
just one of them.
Just
not
one of
both.
them.
Yeah. Now you said despite being young. Young is when it happens, Stuart.
I don't fucking know, man.
That's your body is keyed to do it when you're young. Yeah.
Yeah. So they get pregnant. They end up having to move in with Richard's parents, Al and Rose. They have their daughter Vanessa, who comes into this world in that room, which we're all very excited about.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Richard gives up his art to get a sales job so he can support his family. But he can never seem to get ahead, and he also is very risk averse. He doesn't want to ever put his family into a position where they might be hurt or disappointed. But Margaret longs for a life. She longs for doing things, and she cannot seem to find that with Richard.
And a house of their
bitter.
own. She does not want to
be. Their
she
own.
spends her entire life basically almost living in her in-laws' house. And Richard, here's the thing about him. He wanted to be an artist. He was going to go to art school, but now he can't because he has a family to support. He is so risk-averse, I don't think he'd make a great career as an artist. Because when you're an artist, when you're trying to make a living, it is all risk all the time. Nothing is ever certain, and you got to be ready to just roll with the punches. And he's not great at that. So I wonder if the movie is really saying, this guy has the talent, but he doesn't have what it takes to survive in the dog-eat-dog world of the art market. Cue Velvet Buzzsaw.
Yeah,
through the
Doggy
whole
Dog.
movie?
Yeah, why not? Okay.
In the Doug world of the art market.
World. Okay, so Alan Rose obviously age. Rose has a stroke. And Alan Rose then end up having to move down to Florida so she can get better care. Vanessa grows up, goes to college. I think at one point she's played by Zemeckis.
Yes.
Daughter or granddaughter?
Daughter, I think. But I could
we'll
be. I
find
don't
out.
remember. I think daughter.
Let's
I'm not sure.
let's check the tape, Dan.
I don't have tape of Jasha Zemeckis.
Good,
I mean,
you
other than here.
sicko. You shouldn't have that. So you do have tape of her. Disgusting, Dan.
Yeah, my story keeps changing. I'm sorry.
Vanessa goes to college, then she goes to law school. She's the first in her family to go to college.
She listens to a lot of music on her headphones too. That's a way they can
She
get some needle drops on the soundtrack.
Does yeah, that's true.
In case you were wondering if Robert Zemeckis was going to go to his grave without ever including the song "Cherry Bomb" in one of his movies, don't worry, he does it in here.
I mean, there is a moment where they're listening to "Fooled Around and Fell in Love," and I'm like, oh man, this song rules.
Yeah.
So there's a brief moment of Stuart being excited. Rose passes away, and then Al hurts himself, so he needs some in-home care, so he has to move back to wherever we're at.
Because they're
back
maybe
here.
the secret is that they're all already dead, and this is the purgatory they're in. They can never leave the
That's
house
what I was
for
fucking
long.
waiting for. There's
Yeah.
some kind of fucking curse.
They're all.
okay.
It's just like the Twilight Zone. They're all dolls that live in a doll house, and
Yep.
it turns out they just think they're alive. Yeah.
So Al needs in-home care. His presence, of course, is kind of overwhelming to them. Margaret tries to make the best of it. She tries a variety of different things to get over her dissatisfaction with her husband and her life. She even brings in her like marriage counselor or whatever, who is, of course, presented as being a quack. I would argue. I don't know.
It's hard to tell. He's given the accoutrement of a quack. He's very precise about his title and the initials that go after his name, and he has an English accent. But what he's saying is basically like, you guys shouldn't drag each other down if you're unhappy in this relationship, which is good. Which is good advice.
Yes.
you
No,
know?
I mean, you're right. So Margaret ends up leaving. Shortly after, Al dies.
I want to say, just because like this, movie is so in a way plot light, that I feel like I should sprinkle some more like larger thoughts throughout. Like
That's allowed. I'll allow.
I found some of these parts like moving, but in a way that made me angry at the movie. It's not like I wanted to find them moving. It's just like that the raw materials are sort of impossible not to like feel something of like
the raw material is the disappointments of life, and
Yeah,
how
the disappointments of life.
you can't help yourself from getting older, and that's the real human experience. So it makes sense. I was feeling the same thing. I was like, these are real things that everyone has to deal with in their life,
Yeah.
and that's moving. And this is not the most moving way to present it. You were saying, Dan.
Well, yeah, but I would get kind of mad at the movie because I'm like, okay, you're doing this to me because you're playing with such like raw elements, but you're not particularly saying anything. You're just sort of like coming into my brain, rearranging my emotions, and then like being like, well, gotta go, without like giving me any sort of like lesson or catharsis.
But
that
the
would,
lesson
like,
is that life is
help me.
all disappointment, and eventually you lose your memory and die.
Yeah, we'll get there. But to me, it was sort of like the experience of watching, I don't know, like a long like Christmas like advertisement for Google or film cameras or like something
Yeah.
where it's like they're just trying to associate their product with the idea of like a life lived, and so they have like a bunch of generalized like emotional moments.
Yeah. So you're
And-
saying it's like there was
yeah.
like a Disney ad like that. It was either Disney or Star Wars not too long ago, where it's just like shots of like kids at different birthdays and parents bonding with their children over Star Wars or whatever. And I remember watching it and finding it very emotional. And it's like, but it's not because of the product. Like they're
Right.
just associating the product with being having love and other human beings in your life and
exactly.
getting older.
Like,
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting
fucking
at.
Don
Like,
Draper.
So
you
Dan,
can
I
el-
think
you
Dan, I
can
think
elicit tears from a commercial, but I don't feel good about those tears. Is what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
I think unless it's that commercial about the brother and sister who are definitely having sex in the
But
coffee
that's
commercial.
tears of joy. That's
Oh, yeah. You guys
excitement.
know what I'm
Tears
talking
out
about.
of my wiener.
Yeah, I think it's a Maxwell House commercial.
Tears from my wiener feels like it should be like Stu's like memoir
Yeah.
title or like his
his ballads album. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or my fucking wedding vows. So Al dies. He has one final moment where he sees the ghost of his wife walking through the living room, and then, of course, he disappears. Richard and Margaret kind of reconnect over
He
this
disappears like he's a force ghost, like Obi-Wan.
Basically, I know you weren't paying attention to the movie a lot, but there's a lot of moments where people just fade in and out of reality.
I assumed
Yeah.
that was the scenes transitioning and not them literally
Interesting.
leaving this plane.
There's nothing in the movie that says that.
That's
Yeah,
true.
you gotta-
That's true. I can't add explanations that are not part of
thank
the
you.
in-camera text. That's what Roger Ebert says. Yeah.
Okay, so Richard starts painting again. He tries to make a play to get Margaret back in his life, but she is not interested. However, she also develops what I'm assuming is Alzheimer's.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
It's very heavily bookmarked because she'll be like, "Huh, I went to this thing and I forgot why I was there. Isn't that strange?" And once that happens more than once in a movie, you know this character has
That's
the same way that,
that's like when anytime a female character barfs in a TV show, I'm like, damn it, she's pregnant.
Well,
they're
isn't
pregnant.
she?
And anytime they cough into a handkerchief and there's a spot of red, you know they're going to die. Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
also heavily foreshadowed by some of the clunkiest writing in the movie, where earlier on, a thing that's going to get paid off early in the film, the daughter had lost her ribbon, her blue ribbon,
first place blue ribbon. Yeah.
yeah, and she found it. And when they find it, and the daughter's excited, they say something like, "Well, that's a moment we're never going to forget." And I'm like, I don't know that. I mean, it's nice. It's nice that you found it, but I don't think that in real life I'd be like, now that's a keeper for the ages.
I mean, you wouldn't
And-
say it. No. Yeah.
I might think it to myself. And of course, this is set up later on for this loss of memory.
You might
Since we're
say that a
try-
better
since we're-
movie would have had them say like, "Huh, that was funny. Do you think she'll worry about losing that ribbon? Nah, she's not even going to remember. This isn't the kind of thing you remember." And then later they'd remember. Instead, they're like, "Well, yeah they're like, put it in. Well, take that ribbon and haul it up into the rafters because this is a moment for the
Put it
record
in your-
books.
Yeah, stand
Memory
up and
palace.
cheer. Yeah,
You're going to
I
need
would
this
say-
in case your brain ever dissolves." Yeah.
I would say my favorite earlier moment is when Tom Hanks comes into the living room with a big thing of McDonald's, and he's like, "I brought our favorite breakfast." I'm like, "Oh man, now I'm extra sad." Okay, so he brings they're selling the house. He's decided to move. He's finally decided to sell the house. He brings Margaret for one last visit. She has lost most of her memory, and he is kind of carefully kind of guiding her through this process of showing her the house that they used to live in, and she starts to remember things. And then as she begins to remember things, the camera begins to move. It zooms in and then swirls around. We get to see the rest of the room they're in, which is
Not
what I
that
always
exciting.
wished for.
It would be amazing if we
sitcom.
if you saw the other side of the room and there's like a dungeon wall or a laboratory, like something you'd be like, "Wow, I
but-
wish I'd
yeah,
seen that
yeah.
before."
But the thing that does trigger her remembering is then
Is the blue ribbon.
the ribbon story.
Yeah, the ribbon story. Yeah, exactly. What
when
Dan
they were in this room and the camera turned, was that a CGI room? It looked like it didn't look like a real room to me, and I was like, at least show me
I would
at least show me a
assume-
real physical space.
I'm
I don't
assuming
know.
it's all
Nothing in
digital.
this movie looked real to me.
Yeah.
And then it like zooms out the window, and we see the rest of Philadelphia, I guess, or wherever.
Perth
and,
Amboy, wherever,
Perth
yeah.
Amboy, yep. And then the camera kind of alights atop the manor house that is across the street, and then we see that hummingbird fly into camera, and we're like, that thing's still alive?
I was like, this is kind of a nice shot, a nice way to end it until that damn digital hummingbird came
If it
in.
wasn't
to
a
like,
if it wasn't a digital hummingbird, I would have let because that was one of the few times where I was like, this movie has now inadvertently stumbled into a thought I have a lot, which is about the continuity of kind of like animal species and how the natural world and the human world, even though one affects the other, they're kind of on different time tracks. The natural world is on such a longer timeline than ours is, and the life of a tree encompasses so much time compared to a human life and that kind of stuff. So like it was like, Zemeckis, you almost got into an idea that I can relate to, but he did. But it is so CGI, and it's like it feels like the rat at the end of The Departed, where it's like, get it, wink,
And,
continuity, history,
also-
eternal.
also at that ending, we didn't get into it, but I found it, I don't know, perturbing. Like it's kind of a desire to like, well, this movie about how a bunch of people had unfulfilled lives is kind of a bummer, even though we slathered it in sentimentality. Like, we'll have her remember this thing at the end, and then she'll be like, yes, I remember this place. I love this place. And I'm like, no, you didn't love this place.
You
the whole
hated
movie
it.
was how much you hated this house. You wanted
But
to get out.
But maybe she realized how much she did love it underneath the thick dollops of hate that she felt.
I guess so.
I
think
mean,
there's
we haven't seen the apartment that she moved to that she can walk to work from. Maybe that apartment sucks.
it may be
Yeah,
terrible.
that's-
Yeah, it might be
it just
terrible.
made
And the
me
only
feel
good thing
like-
about it is that Richie and Al are not there. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not the message that the movie's trying to give at all, but it just made me feel like Tom Hanks's character was trying to like trick her into being like, see, we had great times here by like bringing up like one nice memory.
We're still married. You still love me.
Yeah.
So, Dan, I'm curious as to think, because you say it's not the message the movie is trying to get across. Is the movie trying to get across, as you said earlier, any message other than just life, huh?
Well, that's kind of what bothered me. I could see how this might work as a comic.
It works so well as a comic, but it's not hitting you over the head the same. The comic works through hints and small glimpses, whereas this movie is very much like, I'm sorry, he's literally like, buy a house now. Johnson just put through the biggest tax increase since World War II. And it's like, nobody talks like that. Like, nobody explains like what time they're living in all the time,
But as a movie,
Benjamin Button is only 3 years old at this point.
like as a movie, like forgive me for sounding like kind of like a crank. But I
now
saw
you're going to ask that this many years in.
I've been meaning to get to it. My apologies.
Is it because if you don't keep your heart rate up to a certain level, you'll die? Is that
Yeah,
why
that's
you're
why.
Dan, did you have a Hong Kong cocktail? Is that what
I
happened?
did have one. I had a couple.
Oh, shit.
You can't have just one.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. Okay, I guess Dan's going to have sex with
Go
me
down
now.
easy on a racetrack. I saw the trailer and my reaction to it was, having not read the book, I'm like, this does not blow my mind. The idea of like, wow, a lot of stuff happened in one place, one unassuming place. Like,
You're saying
yeah,
that
like
the
that's the
movie-
way
that-
time works. Like
that
a bunch of
the-
stuff happens over time in one place. Like,
That basically the movie's message is communicated pretty well by any historical plaque
yeah,
that you see when you're
Well,
walking
that's
down a street.
Even me standing at a place where something I really care about happened. Like that's, this is where I'm going to lose Elliot, Mr. History. But like, even
Because
if
you're like, I loved it when Abraham Lincoln got shot in the head. I love going there. And I'm
Oh,
like, damn,
man.
what? How can you say that?
No,
you
Mr.
did
History
lose
is
me.
Elliot's Batman villain.
Oh, I
character.
wish I'm Mr. History and it's all history-related crimes.
Yeah.
even if I'm standing someplace that is, something meaningful to me happened that I cared about in the world, I'm like, that's only neat for like a little while, and then I'm like, well, it's not happening now. I don't get to see it, so
I mean, like, about 6-7 months ago, my parents sold the house that I grew up in, that I spent the vast majority of my young life in, and they lived there for 40 years. And walking through it, I found it to be really affecting and moving, but in like, I don't know, like a weird way that this movie does not capture.
yeah. I mean, like if it was a matter of personal history, certainly, but like I don't have that connection to any of the stuff that's going on in the movie, and the movie makes it so generic.
I
Yes,
think it's
I
partly
think that's the issue.
partly the genericness of it, and also I'm gonna, again, this is my personal axe to grind. I think it's partly the boomerness of it. That I feel like there are very few generations that are as obsessed with their own personal histories and growing up as, at the very least, the baby boomers that are involved in the media and tell those stories. And so the idea that like, all right, here's another movie about like emotionally closed off dad from World War II, and his kid has to make a lot of sacrifices to raise a family, and we get to see the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, and like I'm surprised there wasn't a scene where they're watching the moon landing, or something like that, it just feels very the movie feels like it takes for granted how interested you are in that particular slice of history, even with these other ones are arranged around it. This baby boomer experience is very much set up as the central experience of the movie.
Place.
And I think at this point, you could get away with that when Forrest Gump came out, but I think you don't. Too much time has passed. Like you can't get away with that quite the same way now. And so it leaves me cold. I will say though, at the very end, like I was genuinely in some ways moved by seeing them very old and having them talk about the past, but it was more in a sense of like, yeah, well, now that I've sat through this whole movie, like I feel like I lived it too. I saw all those things, and now you're talking about them. But it felt somewhat unearned.
Or it makes you think of like in a generic way, like I was saying, like a commercial might, like, oh,
yeah,
someday I will be doing something like this, and then you're allowed to project yourself on it. But I have a genuine question, which is, do you think this movie gains anything by like jumping around in time and sometimes going backwards? Because to me, honestly, other than I can understand the appeal of like, oh, we can have all these stories and we can tell them in more of an impressionistic way rather than having like a full story. But I feel like any head of emotional steam that could work up is undercut for me by like there's never any like the parallels between the timelines are never like exciting or interesting in such a way.
I think that's the thing. I think it's not totally a problem with the format, but the format requires much more precise and powerful content and actual plot and narrative within that format to do what they want to do. And like you look at a movie like Intolerance, the D.W. Griffith movie, and that is bouncing around in time between a bunch of different timelines in history, but the narratives all kind of crest at different moments together. They all like reach a climax together. And so you get this feeling of these cycles repeating through time. I don't mean to praise D.W. Griffith, but but that movie, it works that way. Whereas this one, because it feels kind of sort of randomly bouncing around, I agree that you don't get that feeling of like, oh, there's real connection between these things, or we're seeing, except for the fact that everybody dies at the end, in different timelines, which you walk away from it being like, oh, okay, so the story of life is the story of disappointment and death. Like, oh, okay, well,
I mean, I feel like
you.
something like Oppenheimer bounces around in time quite a bit, and I feel like it manages to work it all together pretty satisfyingly.
Yeah, I think it's more. You just have to be so careful.
But that's one story that you're following that bounces around in time. Whereas like some of this stuff, I'm like,
yeah, Dan's like, why didn't he do something else other than just invent that stupid bomb?
well, but
it's like, I mean, like some of the characters in here just feel like padding because like there's nothing to their storylines. So it's like, well, what are you doing here? Why are you in this movie?
He's trying to fly a fucking plane to him.
Yeah, he does.
Or even the scenes with their daughter, where like there's one where she's just like listening on the Walkman and can't hear that the phone is ringing, and another where she and her friend are doing aerobics and the power goes out, and it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, I don't like if this was a movie made up of small, kind of the forgotten moments that you wouldn't think about otherwise, that would make sense to me. Or if it's a movie about the big moments in life, that would make sense to me. But instead, it's just kind of this mishmash. And you're on in that locked off frame for so long, and I feel like that turnaround where the camera finally moves should hit you really hard, but it just doesn't. The way that I was thinking of there's that short that 12 Monkeys was based on, La Jetée or whatever, however it's pronounced, La Jette, I don't know, and where it's all still images, and then there's the one moment where the guy is looking at the woman that he's fallen in love with in the past, and she blinks, and you were like, like the sudden shock of motion, and it's handled so beautifully there. And I was like, that was the first thing that came to mind as I was watching. I was like, oh, I wish it was more like that, where it was more of like a shock of sudden change that really affects you. But I think it all comes down to like, you can have a fancy frame, but the picture inside the frame's got to be where the beauty comes from.
Yeah, I mean, that's because like it's not like I necessarily need it to be more conventional storytelling, but it does not seem to be. It does not have an idea in its head other than Robert Zemeckis was like, I'd like to try and do a movie where we don't move the camera,
I feel like if I'd encountered this movie when I was like maybe a teenager or maybe early 20s, where the like form of it I would find really interesting, I think I might like it more. But as an adult, I'm like, this isn't enough. This is like, there's just not enough meat to this sandwich. It's all bread and sauces.
I think the
and not bread circuses.
I think the most complimentary way you can say is that I think it's an interesting experiment that does not quite come off. Doesn't quite function.
We're already there, but let's do final judgments. Whether this is a good bad movie, a bad movie, or a movie you kind of like. I'm going to say it's a bad movie. It kind of like in some ways greatly put me off because it felt like it was like, not done with any particular insight, but it was also like breaking into my like heart and trying to punch it at the same time. But
Dan, were you on acid while you were watching the movie?
But I do think that, I mean, if you're the sort of person who's like really into movies to the degree that you're going to spend time on something that you may not like just because it's kind of interesting, I don't know. You might want to check it out because it is interesting that he tried it. I just don't think it works at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's a moment about an hour in that I picked up on in my second watch of this movie where they keep repeating the phrase "time sure flies." They're talking about how time moves so fast, and I was like, yeah. And I can't, like, why are you reminding me that I'm spending my precious fucking moments on this thing? Like, I'm about to turn 45, guys, at the end of the month. So, like, maybe this stuff's weighing heavier on my mind, but it feels like this movie felt very, like I felt trapped in it in not a good way. Like, and yeah, it's not for me. I don't recommend it. This is a bad movie. This is a miss for old Stu. No thanks.
It's interesting they're saying time sure moves by quickly because Professor Madonna would argue that time moves by so slowly. But anyway, saying that aside, this is a movie that I have to say that this is not a movie that I kind of liked, but it's a movie that I wanted to kind of like. And I do admire making a movie that is a formal experiment and trying something different. I wish it had worked better. Maybe that's also some residual love for the original book, which I really recommend. But it feels mostly kind of wrongheaded, and to the point also where like the whole movie, I'm like, I don't think Tom Hanks is the right guy to play this part. To be honest, like he's such an innately likable figure that I kept waiting. That it was like only halfway through the movie that I was like, oh, so he's just going to be like a disappointed sad sack who is mean to people. Or is having trouble things most of the movie. I think there's stuff like it was fighting, like his innate charisma was kind of fighting that a little bit in a way that made it difficult for me. But yeah, it's a movie that I can't really recommend, but it's worth look at a couple minutes of it and see, or if there's a supercut online of just the Lazy Boy storyline, then just watch a happy story of a couple that loves each other that invent a chair for relaxation and make their millions. Yeah.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors because the Flophouse is sponsored in part by Squarespace, which is the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. You don't want a bunch of platforms. You want the Swiss Army knife of platforms. Squarespace. It offers an unrivaled suite of visual design effects built in and ready to go on any Squarespace website. You can create an elevated online aesthetic. Don't de-elevate. Elevate your aesthetic with dozens of modern and intuitive options that fit every brand, industry, and purpose. Connect major social and multimedia accounts to your website, your very own, in a few clicks even. Clips too, why not? But more likely clicks, because that's how a mouse works. As icons, direct links, or embedded feeds. Hey, why don't you go to squarespace.com? It's a little secret for you for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/flop to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
We are also sponsored by Rocket Money. I apologize, guys. We've done so many months of me only doing the ads where I talk about our stuff that it took me a moment to remember that I had an ad of my own. It's still kind of the beginning of the year, 2025, which means that it is still time for you to organize your life. We have not yet gotten so far into the year that your window is shut and you've just got to deal with other things. The start of the new year is the perfect time to get organized, set your goals, prioritize what matters most. And if one of your top priorities is financial wellness, Rocket Money can help make your goals achievable. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. We all want those things. We don't want unwanted subscriptions. It's right there in the name, unwanted. We want to keep track of our spending. We want to lower our bills. We want to grow our savings. Easily create a personalized budget with custom categories to help keep your spending on track. See your monthly spending trends in each category to know exactly where your money is going. No longer will your budgeting be a mystery that just says, "Here be dragons" on the map. Now you can finally find out what's there. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/flop today. That's rocketmoney.com/flop. Again, that is rocketmoney.com/flop.
We also have a Jumbotron, and it goes like this. Listen up, flop lovers. One of your compatriots has made their very own game, coming to Kickstarter. Pizza Rolls, that's ROLES, is a 10-minute hidden roles style game about awkwardly ordering pizza. Players simulate a conversation with each player, subtly trying to get their preferred toppings on the pie. Simple yet engaging, it's pocket-sized, family-friendly fun that can really connect people, whether they're young and old or casual and long-term gamers. That's Pizza Rolls, ROLES. So Pizza Rolls is coming to Kickstarter, February 2025. Search Pizza Rolls, that's ROLES, on Kickstarter now. Sounds perfect for a game night, Dan. Although I usually like super complicated games that make Dan mad. But you love pizza, so maybe this would be a good one to cycle in.
I like a casual, friendly game.
Super intense for me. But
Okay.
I could be seduced by pizza.
Okay.
Couple of Ninja Turtles over here.
Big E is a former WWE champion.
He spent 10 years at the top, sharing the ring with John Cena and Roman Reigns.
So, what's next?
When I retire, I'm going to move to the desert. I'm going to delete all my socials. I'm going to disappear. Y'all will never hear from me again. I'm going to sit on the couch, chill, and live my life.
From the legendary tag team The New Day.
It's Big E on Tights and Fights.
I feel like I need to listen to a few episodes that you guys have because this was really enjoyable. So
Oh, no.
Thank you so much for your time. Oh yes. Oh, yes.
Available on Maximum Fun or wherever you get your podcasts.
The following are real reenactments of pretend emergency calls.
911. My husband! It's my husband! Calm down, please. What about your husband? He loads the dishwasher wrong. Please help! Please help me! Where are you now, ma'am? At the kitchen table. I was with my dad. He mispronounced his words intentionally.
There are plenty of podcasts on the hunt for justice, but only one podcast has the courage to take on the silly crimes. Judge John Hodgman, the only true crime podcast that won't leave you feeling sad and bad and scared for once. Only on MaximumFun.org.
Shall we move on to some letters from listeners?
Yeah, why not?
Yes, why not? Why not, Dan?
Why
Thank
don't
you
we-
for asking my permission for that.
Why don't we treat ourselves? This one's from Gene, last name withheld,
Wolf?
who writes,
Who writes a whole bunch of antique
All in the
words that we're
first
going to have to look up?
this is a JEAN. My husband and I recently went on a cross-country road trip
Cool.
and spent the majority of our driving time listening to the Flophouse.
Sorry.
Thanks for the laughs as we traversed from Chicago to Portland, LA to Roswell, Dallas, Nashville, and more.
Sounds great.
During our trip, we randomly parked across the street from the Toretto family, home of the Fast and the Furious fame. Understandably
the
causing us...
Toretto family home. From the way, Dan, you read that. Kind of confused me a little
The
bit.
Toretto family home. Yes, you're correct.
I was like, were they also at the rest stop that you were at, the Toretto family?
Well, let me take that again. During our trip, we randomly parked across the street from the Toretto family home of the Fast and the Furious fame. Understandably causing us to repeat family at each other for the next few minutes in varying Vin Diesel delivery styles
Drank some
and
fucking Coronas.
coherence. Here's my question. Have you ever randomly found yourself in a famous/infamous filming location, or is there a location you would love to stumble upon while traveling? Thank you for all the fun. You guys are the best. Gene, last name withheld. I remember being in, I think it's Astoria, Washington, is it? Where the Goonies, much of the Goonies, this is the seaside town from the
cool,
Goonies,
cool.
and being like, "Oh, damn, we are in the town from the Goonies."
Yeah.
Look at
They
that.
saved it with all the pirate money, right?
We
Yeah.
sure are.
Demolished.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta hide from Anne Ramsey, or she might. I don't know.
Never.
Twist my ear.
She can kill me if she wants.
Yeah. You might want to hide from Anne Ramsey or Ayn Rand, either one, you know.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I don't know that I'm trying to think if I've ever stumbled on. I think mine has been more the opposite, where if I'm watching a movie set in New York, I will suddenly recognize a corner or a building from my real life. But I've done lots of trips where I have gone to shooting locations. My wife is from the Bay Area, and that means there's a lot of Hitchcock locations around there. He did a lot of shooting in the Bay Area. And so for many years, each time we would go to visit her family, I would be like, which location from Vertigo are we going to today? Which location from The Birds are we going to? And it's all really fun. And I hope someday to go to Vienna and take the tour there to see the locations for The Third Man, which is not a Hitchcock film, but is very Hitchcockian, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I spent some time in Vienna, but that was pre-Stuart having watched The Third Man, so
you had no idea.
I had no idea. I didn't know where to hear good zither music.
I just assumed it was just any
all over
cafe
the
you walked
place.
by, just zither was coming out. Yeah.
I feel like that's the thing about being in New York is that you're just constantly running into things you saw on Law and Order and whatnot.
Yeah, movies like Law and Order.
Corpses. This is from Brendan, last name withheld, who writes, "I'm a big sports guy, like I know the three of you are as well.
Yeah.
Whoosh.
I was in the hospital.
Couple of leatherheads over here.
I was in the hospital with my first kidney stone
Oh, I'm sorry.
when we were blessed with the 84 Brady episode, which featured some A-plus acting from former New England Patriots stars Rob Gronkowski and Tom Brady.
And Lily Tomlin, former
Yeah.
New England Patriots star.
Yeah.
This episode paired incredibly well with the morphine that was being pumped into me most of the day.
I
The
feel like
band
our
Morphine?
yeah. I feel like our podcast usually goes down better when you got some morphine in your system.
Yeah.
Like most things. Everyone always wants to know what the worst performances were from athletes, but as true movie experts, I know you need a more difficult question. What was the best performance you've seen from an athlete or other non-actor in a film? Thanks for years of laughs. Brendan, last name withheld.
I thought Marshawn Lynch was very funny in Bottoms.
Was very funny about
I have to say I'm withholding judgment a little bit because every time an ad for Love Hurts is on, my older son points out, he goes, Marshawn Lynch is in that. You got to go see that because Marshawn Lynch is going to be in it. So I'm like,
right.
all right, I guess I'll find out how good
I hear
Marshawn Lynch
worse
is.
things
in it.
about.
Based
yeah.
on the early reviews, we're going to be watching.
We may watch it for the podcast,
I think
which is a
possibly,
shame
yeah.
because
Too
I
bad.
like what's his face.
Yeah, Ke
Yeah,
Huy
it's too
Quan
bad.
deserves better. Yeah.
But maybe Ariana DeBose. What's her
DeBose,
name?
yeah.
Yeah.
DeBose. Like
I guess
DeBose Wave Radio.
Yeah.
Popular Mechanics Best of What's New 1985. Yeah.
I have I mean, it's not like amazing acting, but as far as like
O.J.
athletes
Simpson
go,
in the Naked Gun movies?
Woof.
Is that what
I was
you're going
gonna
to say,
go-
Dan?
Let me tell you some bad news
I
about
was
it.
gonna,
Why? What's
I was
going on with
gonna
him?
go actually a related direction, but not there. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I think, is funny in
Yeah.
Airplane. You know, he's not.
Yes, that's true.
He's not asked to do a lot of heavy lifting acting wise, but he does what he does very well. But then known as a singer, this is her only movie. I liked Alana Haim a lot in Licorice Pizza, a movie that I know that people have mixed feelings about, but I think that her performance was.
I think she's certainly the highlight of that movie. It's not a movie I like, but I like her performance in it quite a bit. Yeah.
And then I was thinking about there are people like it's sort of an open question, like, is this person not an actor? If like I feel like there's a lot of people out there who didn't intend necessarily to become actors and then had long careers. Like they weren't an actor when they started out. I was thinking specifically of like Barkhad Abdi from Captain Phillips, who was a driver when he was cast in that and sort of steals the movie, but then he went on to have a career. Or
I mean, that's the thing about acting is until you have your first professional role, no one's an actor and everyone's an actor. I mean, there are lots of great movies with non-professional actors in them. One of my favorite movies is The Fall, where the girl in that, was very much, she was not a
She
professional
was
trained
in
actor.
on it.
No, she wasn't. She thought Lee Pace was paralyzed. But But with I was thinking about other athletes. I'm like, the question for me then is, when does someone stop being an athlete who's in movies and become an actor? Like, is Carl Weathers or Jim Brown? Like, they're in tons of movies and they're really good in them. Like, but are they athletes or are they actors or are they both? Like, Arnold Schwarzenegger is technically an athlete who became an actor and became one of the biggest movie stars in the world. You know. But also, I was just looking online, and I had forgotten about Kevin Garnett in Uncut Gems, where his performance, I find it is at a like Nicolas Cage, Christopher Walken at times level of like, this character is so intensely involved in what's going on, and so like I really buy his passionate obsession with this gem that he has no reason to become so obsessed with.
I mean, I feel like there's a handful of people in that movie that are not actors.
Yeah, that's true.
Just the heavies. Yeah,
and the romantic interest, right? She was I think that's her first role, right?
Julia Fox.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I think it might have been her first role. But she's obviously been in other things. She was just in a Soderbergh movie, dude.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, she was in that Soda Bread movie. So it's a good question. I mean, like, that's the thing that
feels like some shitty bully picking on Steven Soderbergh.
Hey, Soda Bread. Ireland wants you back. What?
Just admit it's you editing all of your own movies.
It reminds me of the worst heckling I ever saw, which was at a Yankees Red Sox game at Fenway. Mariano Rivera, one of the greatest closing pitchers of all time, was pitching.
What did David say to him?
No, David wasn't there, but these guys who were Boston guys were sitting in front of us, and they were going, "Hey, Mariano, Playgirl called. They want you to edit their next issue." And I was like, I've got to decode what this heckle means. Yeah. And then they were calling him like marinara sauce, and I'm like, that doesn't really work as like an insulting name.
Let's move on to recommendations of movies that might be a better use of your dwindling time on this earth,
if it's possible,
than here. I'm gonna very quickly do sort of a dual linked recommendation.
You're gonna do a duel with Stewart? Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
No offense, my money's on Stewart.
Okay. Well, I mean, if it's a duel, like there's weapons involved. Anyway.
You're not helping your case, Dan.
That'll even things up.
Yeah, I think Dan's going to be much better with a claymore. Sure.
I'm going to recommend two movies that are aren't connected, but are kind of linked in my mind in that they are two movies that don't necessarily make a whole lot of sense or need to make sense on a plot level, but are sort of like genre dreams you might have. And I enjoyed both of them. One is Mutant Hunt from 1987, which is like this very low budget sci-fi action kind of
you had
horror elements.
Mutant Hunt.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to do too much hard selling when the song is called Mutant Hunt.
For the budget this thing clearly had, they have some pretty delightful effects at certain points. There's a sort of corpse robot at the end that's like a puppet animatronic that looks kind of great. It just feels like...
Say less, Dan.
Yeah, it feels
Dan,
like a dream.
Stop selling past the clothes. Come on.
Well, it feels like a dream of like an 80s VHS cover. And then also I'd like to recommend from 1966 a Japanese movie in America called Black Tight Killers, which is kind of a pop art feelings. That like it feels sort of like almost like Danger Diabolik or like the Batman TV show in a way. Mm-hmm. It has like crime going on in Japan, but it has this gang of like go-go dancing girl the titular black tight killers who are actually pretty nice when you get to know them. But it's also sort of just a beautiful thing to watch, that sort of like pop art genre feel where it's like it doesn't need to make sense as long as something exciting is being thrown in front of your face every few minutes. So those are my recommendations.
I'm going to recommend a beautiful little movie that I had to pause so I could watch here. I am recommending La Chimera, a movie that also deals with how people deal with the past, but it does it in a much more beautiful and interesting way. This is set in the 80s. It's directed by Alice Rohrwacher. And Josh O'Connor from Challengers and other things plays a kind of a baby girl archaeologist type guy who falls in from England, who falls in with a group of grave robbers, like tomb robbers, to pilfer like treasures from the past. And he has this like kind of almost supernatural ability to sense when he's above a gravesite or a tomb, almost like literally he's dowsing for these graves. And then it turns into there's also some story. Isabella Rossellini's in it. I don't know. It's beautiful. It's great. I highly recommend it. It's got that kind of like, it's both like, it feels very real and lived in, but also kind of light and breezy, but everything kind of makes sense, and I don't know, it's great. La Chimera, watch that shit. It's on Hulu.
I'm going to recommend a movie that is kind of the exact opposite of what Dan was recommending. This is a recent studio almost release that is very not
Coyote versus Acme?
Yep, Coyote versus
Wow.
I would love to see that. No, but almost. So this is Juror Number 2, the Clint Eastwood movie that came out recently, which is very visually spare, visually plain. The storytelling is very traditional.
Unlike all of Clint's other movies.
Yeah. No, but even like a movie like Unforgiven has a few kind of visual stylistic touches. And the older Clint Eastwood gets, and he's very old now, the more I think he's focused on just super straightforward storytelling. And this is a movie that at first watch, I was like, okay, this is like an interesting kind of like crime, not quite thriller, ethical drama, I guess. But the more I thought about it, the more it really sat with me, and the more it really got into my head about this is a movie about people who are not bad people, who are stuck in an untenable situation and are trying to do their best to do the right thing, but find that there are either elements of their own personality or elements of the world around them that are making it difficult for them to do the right thing. And the idea that justice is something that is not necessarily a happy or even a fair thing or a nice thing, but a thing that in an almost kind of Greek tragedy way, justice is something that takes its victims, and I thought it was, it really sat with me for a long time. And the closest thing I can think to it is that like, this is Clint Eastwood kind of like his First Reformed in a way, which is making it sound more intense or extreme than it is. First Reformed is a really intense movie because it's a Paul Schrader movie, and Paul Schrader is a madman, whereas Clint Eastwood is more generally kind of like a slow-going guy in his later movies. But I found it to be a movie that had a deceptively still surface, but a lot of depth underneath it. Kind of the opposite of here, which felt like it had a lot going on the surface and not a lot underneath. And so I really would recommend Juror Number 2 and then taking some time to think about it afterwards,
That's a movie that I did like, and I think ultimately by the end, like the end really landed for me, and I had a lot of the feelings that you're talking about, but that effective ending was almost undone for me personally. I know that I'm not trying to convince you by like, for the whole first half of the movie, I'm like, this is the dumbest court case. Like, this is not like the law on this is like laughable to me. Like,
I mean, yes and no. I feel like the movie it's a case. It's one of these things where like the court case is not clever or particularly hard to parse. Like, it shouldn't be a hard case to win in some ways, for the defense, because there's like it's all circumstantial evidence and stuff. But I feel like the movie's not really about that. Like,
I just didn't buy a lot of it, is all I'm saying. Like, there's a point at which, like, there could be a mistrial. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, there should be a mistrial at this point. For one thing, there's a lot of, like, just obvious ways that this person would be defended that aren't even touched on. But, like, that's not what Clint cares about.
But it's not what the movie is about. I feel like this is not – the movie at times plays like it's starting to become 12 Angry Men, but it is not. That's not what it has on its mind. And it's more interested in these characters – kind of dealing with their choices rather than with the actual strengths or not of the case, which is fine with me because I don't really care that much about the case in the middle,
Now, I haven't seen this movie, right?
You just saw Juror Number 1, the first one, yeah.
Imagine I'm someone listening to the Flophouse, and you're selling this movie to me. Now, I note that Nicholas Hoult is in this movie. Does he play a weird little creep?
He does not play a weird little creep in this one. No, he is the all-American. He's the all-American guy who has kind of a dark secret. He has his darker side.
Is it that he's a little creep?
No, it's not this little creep, unfortunately. This is a movie fairly devoid of weird little creeps. But like, for instance, so there's the scenes in here where you kind of you're like, I don't understand why I'm seeing this moment. Why am I seeing this moment in a person's life? There's a scene in this movie where Nicholas Hoult and his wife are giving out candy to kids for their trick-or-treaters, and they're dressed as the couple from American Gothic, which is kind of on the nose type symbolism in a way. Yeah. But they don't talk about the case. They don't talk about the plot. It's just them kind of having this moment of living their life and interacting with the kids who come for trick-or-treating. And it was it's not fully realistic. It's not a naturalistic scene. It feels like a movie scene, but I was like, I like that this plays thematically with some of the stuff that's going on in it, but it is not every scene is hitting the plot super hard. I liked getting this glimpse of another side of their life, you know. Although there was, as the first time he showed up in that costume, I didn't realize it was Halloween, and I was like, what the hell is he wearing, like old farmer overalls? Like, what's going on? And then I realized it's an American Gothic costume.
Okay, yeah.
But anyway, I'm sorry that this one didn't hit the spot, but for Dan, but I still recommend it.
I'm still glad I saw it. I'm not trying to undo your recommendation. I'm just
I feel like this is one where I didn't really feel the power of it until the very end of the movie. As it was going on, I was like, this movie's fine. It's okay. And then once the movie ended, I was like, okay, that wasn't the movie I thought it was going to be, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll have to watch it and break the tie.
Yeah, that's right. That's the important thing.
Tune back in to see who wins the Battle of Juror number 2.
And tune back
Whether it's
in.
enthusiastic Elliot Kalin or denying Dan McCoy.
And tune back in next time for another episode of the Flophouse, because this one, sadly, is drawing to a close.
Oh, man. But I loved it here.
No, you didn't, Stuart.
I loved it here.
Don't you remember, Stuart? This is where you started the episode, and this is where you tried to summarize it, and we kept interrupting you. And this is where Dan shot down my recommendation. Don't you remember all these moments in our lives?
Right. I hate it here. Why won't you let me die?
Well, let's do it. Let's
And it'd be so funny if at the end of the movie, he's like, and you gave birth there, and that's where we got married. And she goes, just let me go. Why won't you let me go?
Before we go, though, I would like to thank our network, Maximum Fun.
Yeah.
Go to MaximumFun.org to check out other great shows. We're gearing up for the drive soon. We've got some good things planned for that. We hope you will join us. And we would like to thank Alex Smith, our producer. He goes by the name Howell Doughty when he's doing such things as making music or doing Twitch streams. Why don't you look him up on the internet? But for the Flophouse, I have been Dan McCoy.
I've been Stuart Wellington.
And you know I'm Elliot Kalin.
Okay. See you later, suckers.
Whoa. Run. Slam door.
You have like 1 million tabs open.
How many tabs do you have open? 1 million?
I do not.
Oh, man, there's like 40
1, 2,
tabs.
3, 4, 5. I have 6 tabs open.
That's a lot of soda. 6 tabs.
Google search for big naturals.
Uh-huh.
That doesn't seem like Dan's Google search.
No, it's not.
No.
Yeah, you're projecting
I'm projecting. That's what mine is.
Okay.
Because I had to use Google for that. I can't find it.
You have no other way of doing
it.
Okay.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
supported
Directly
by you.